Do I think either of these teams at this point will probably make it? No. But it gives you that outside shot if you win this football game. South Carolina is getting 2.5 points versus Clemson. The over-under here is 49. Tyler, what do you have to say about this football game?
Well, this isn't the most important game, but you could make a case that it is because Texas A&M, I think both teams have a shot at the playoffs, whereas South Carolina and Clemson, the loser doesn't. The loser's pretty much out of it, unless Clemson were to get lucky with Miami losing to Syracuse. But I think the loser of this game is pretty much out of it. But this is going to be a dogfight. This is going to be a bloodbath. It's kind of weird how this is a noon game, and ESPN has their D team announcers announcing this game, which is very upset. The way that this game has been thrown onto ESPN and treated for this weekend is pretty pathetic, in my opinion. This is probably going to be a top 15 matchup. We'll find out on the rankings here, I believe, shortly. I thought it actually would be right now, but anyways, this South Carolina team is just on fire. Who's going to be able to stop them, really? If you've just been watching South Carolina since the Ole Miss game, this has been a completely different team. Even the Alabama game, they came out really, I wouldn't say hot, but they came out really fierce defensively. That's just who they are. They're a really good defensive team. And Clemson, on the other hand, week 1 against Georgia, we dominated them in the second half. We just completely dominated them in the second half. Now, Clemson fans can decipher different analysis on that, as Georgia really couldn't run the ball successfully other than the outside run there. And that's why I think South Carolina is going to have to attack here on the outside with Clemson. Believe it or not, I do think South Carolina has way more athletes than Clemson. That's kind of crazy for me to even say. And as well as Lenora Sellers is playing really, really good football at the best time possible. I know it's a road game, but the last time South Carolina did travel to Clemson, they beat them. And I like South Carolina in this game. I'm going to take South Carolina to, I guess, pull the upset on the road at Clemson in a very good game. But the difference in this game to me, it's going to be South Carolina's rush game, especially with Lenora Sellers. I do expect him to at least surpass the 60 yards rushing, which is a lot for a quarterback. But he's going to be the key to this game. Hopefully Rocket Sanders can get it going. Even if he's averaging 4 yards per carry, those are 4 tough physical yards per carry. He's one of those backs that just falls forward. And I don't really think Clemson's going to have so much success running the football with Phil Maffa, who is exceptional. Probably the second best running back in the ACC, obviously to Amari and Hampton. But in the end, I do think South Carolina is going to pull the upset here. I have South Carolina going into Clemson and beating them 31-24 on Saturday. This is going to be a fun game. This is probably the best game of the weekend. I think. I think this is actually the best matchup of the weekend. Give me the Gamecocks to ride that wave.
First off, don't speak that blasphemy. No, I'm kidding. But no, this game's going to be fun. This defensive line for South Carolina versus the offensive line of Clemson, and there's a possibility of injuries as well with Clemson on their offensive line. If that's the case and you take in an offensive line that already wasn't that good with backups versus a defensive line that I think, like I've said for a while now, I think the front four of South Carolina is the best in the country, then I think this is going to be a huge issue for Clemson. I don't care if it's at home. Lenora, if you would have said 4 weeks ago that Lenora Sellers is playing better or a better player than Cade Klubnik, I think people would have laughed at you. But Lenora Sellers is really good right now. Like, there's an argument to be made. He's a top 10 quarterback in college football. That's how well he's playing. And the future there is bright at South Carolina. You have him. You have Nick Harbor on the outside. You have Dylan Stewart on the edge. They have a lot of young football players on both sides of the ball. Now, their defensive line, for the most part, is pretty old, and most of them will go off to the NFL. But still young guys you can build around on this football team, and a lot of to look forward to in the future for South Carolina. Yeah, I don't think South Carolina is going to get in the playoff because they lost, unfortunately, to two teams that are basically tied with them in that 9-3 range, which is Ole Miss and Alabama. You lost to both of them, and you got killed by Ole Miss at home. So I don't see any way the committee could justify putting them in over Ole Miss. Could you justify putting them in over Alabama? Yeah, I think you could, because you could say, hey, they lost on the road by 2 points. It was close enough. We think this team's better now. I actually wouldn't even have an issue with that. I do. I'm going to take Clemson. I don't know why. I'm just going to take Clemson here. I'm going to believe in Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik to get the job done. I think it's going to be a really close football game. That 2.5's right on it for me. I'm going to take Clemson to win this game 31-28. So I'm going to take them to cover by half a point. This is one of those, again, I don't love it. And I'm taking the over here as well. This is a game I would stay away from if you didn't make me decide. Obviously, we do this show and we're forced to decide, so I'm going to make a pick here. I'm not going to, run away from it and say, no, I'm not going to make a pick. So I'm going to take Clemson. I'm going to take them in a very close football game. And honestly, I think the difference here is I do think Cade Klubnik with his legs will be able to make enough plays versus South Carolina. I think if he wasn't as mobile as he was, I would take South Carolina. But I think with his legs, he'll be able to do enough to score enough points versus the South Carolina defense, which is very, very good.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a little bit worried for Clemson's defense. If Clemson's defense as a whole since 2021 has just been kind of declining, and this season, again, they kind of struggle. In that loss against Louisville, they struggled with the run, and it was kind of surprising because when you think about Clemson, they're a very physical and strong up front type of team, and they gave up, I believe, almost 300 yards rushing to Louisville or something like that. 150-something yards rushing to a true freshman running back. Shout out to Coach Braum. He's a giant killer. With Coach quotation marks, going back to what he was doing at Purdue. But still, that was a big kind of shocker there. And then the Pittsburgh game, a game in which Clemson and Pittsburgh equally played terrible. If I watched that game from start to finish, and neither team blew me away. The thing that came out big was the amount of penalties Pittsburgh really gave that game away. They found a way to do it. But again, they had a backup quarterback, and I've been going back and forth with Pitt fans and, trying to enlighten how big losing Holstein was. They just don't agree with me on that. That's fine, whatever. But that was a huge loss. Having your quarterback out in that game was just big. And they gave up, 350 yards passing to a backup quarterback. I believe that was his first career start. So I'm a little bit worried about this Clemson defense, and I think South Carolina can find some holes. The difference is, can Clemson basically shut down the run and make Lenore Sellers beat them through the air? I don't think so. I like South Carolina's offensive line enough, as well as these young wide receivers, maybe get them some hitch passes or something on the outside to get them involved, especially Nick Harbor. But Dalvin Campbell, he's starting to come on late. I'm forgetting who else on the South Carolina wide receiving core, but it's starting to get better. This team is getting better offensively. That's why I'm taking the over in this game as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game to watch. I definitely think it's probably the second most entertaining game of the week, and obviously I have some personal bias there, but I'm excited to watch it.